Cages or wings, which do you prefer? Ask the birds. Fear or love, baby, don't say the answer. Actions speak louder than louder than louder than louder than louder than cages or wings, which do you prefer? Ask the birds. Fear or love, baby, don't say the answer. Actions speak louder, louder than louder than. They speak louder, louder than louder than. Actions speak louder than.
Hello and welcome to another edition of After Hours. I'm Jonathan Silverstein, the artistic director here at Keen Company. For those of you who are joining us who are new, we are an off-Broadway theater company that champions identification and connection through stories about the decisive moments that change us. I'm so happy to be with you tonight. It's shocking that it is light out. We were just sort of saying this almost doesn't feel like after hours anymore. It feels like hours. Before we get started, I would just like to say I'm coming to you from Brooklyn today, which is the traditional lands of the Munsee, Lenape, and Canarsie peoples. I would like to thank and pay my respects to elders both past and present. And if you are joining us, I want to say thank you. If you at home encounter an Indigenous person in your travels this week, I hope you will express some gratitude. So tonight we have with us Brian Herrera, and I'm so excited to get the conversation going. But first, let me welcome aboard my courageous and congenial co-hosts, Ashley and Billy.
I am
Wow.
so thrilled that we've started a tradition in which we've forced you to come up with an alliterative adjective for us every time.
Yeah, man, those are some big words. Supercalifragilistic, dude.
It's on. Well, as we discovered last week, SAT vocabulary. What can I say?
Yeah.
That is true. That is so
Maybe it's like one of those games where you have to add on every time. So by the last episode, I expect you to say all of them in order.
So it's light outside of your windows. It's just, this is crazy.
It is crazy. It doesn't feel like Keen after hours anymore. It just feels like Keen during hours. You know?
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah, it's really throwing me off, but I'm excited.
Truly, truly.
In the before times, as we will call them.
Sure.
Before
Corona.
Exactly. Our office is is windowless.
Mm-hmm.
And so very often we would be working, certainly to now, and would not have any idea whether it was light or dark. It is so weird to look out the window and see that it's light out.
Yeah, I don't know if I can work during light daylight hours. Like we're like mole people.
Well, I'm very excited for our guest today, you guys. This is very exciting. Should we bring him out?
Yeah.
I think we should.
Without further ado.
Our guest tonight is Brian Herrera, who is a scholar and an artist and a performer and an all-around amazing person. So brilliant, a professor at Princeton, and I cannot wait to chat with him. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Brian Herrera.
Woo!
Welcome.
Welcome,
Thank
Brian.
you. Exciting to be here. I'm joining you from Princeton, which is a land of the Lenni Lenape, and in particular, the living legacy of the Nanticoke Lenni Lenape. So,
Excellent.
great to be here.
Awesome. Well, let me give everyone just a brief little bio of Brian. Brian Herrera is by turns a writer, teacher, and scholar, all those things. Mm-hmm. Presently based in New Jersey, as he had said, but forever rooted in New Mexico. Brian's work, whether academic or artistic, examines the history of gender, sexuality, and race within and through U.S. popular performance. Brian is the Associate Professor of Theater in the Lewis Center for the Arts at Princeton University, where he is also a core faculty member in the program in Gender and Sexuality and a faculty affiliate with the programs in American Studies, Music Theater, and Latino Studies. Now, we know Brian specifically through his work with Arts Equity, and specifically through several discussions that the staff and board had over the fall and early winter on anti-racism at Keene Company. And we had many wonderful chats, and I would say that for someone who has not worked with us in a sort of creative way, you probably know more about us than many of our after hours.
It's true.
But he is, I will just editorialize and say that Brian is not only incredibly intelligent and incredibly generous, but he is just a sweet and wonderful facilitator that really sort of brings out the best of the groups that he works with. So we're grateful to have worked with him and really grateful to have you with us tonight, Brian.
Well, thank you. It's been fun to get to know you, and then it's also I'm thrilled to be joining this adventure. I don't know what's in store for me. It's very exciting.
Now we're the facilitators. We shifted the dynamic.
It's always a very different ride every Monday night.
We learn something new every time. Mm-hmm.
So we often like to start by, let's say, turning back the clock, maybe turning back the calendar pages. Imagine those ripping away and go back to the earlier days of Brian Herrera, and curious how maybe some of your early experiences in theater and or how you got bit by the theater bug.
Well, I have a story that's very conventional in a lot of ways. You know, like I started acting in school plays. I like to say that I was a boy who followed directions and could speak loudly. So I got a lot of parts. And
top
so,
the class, yeah.
So I got all the good parts, and then I went to college, and then I went to a college with a lot of really talented actors, many of whom are sort of not quite household names, but household faces. And so I stopped getting parts, and then I sort of edged into becoming a director, et cetera. But I think so in some ways I'm the traditional track of like, I was an actor, became a director, that didn't end, and then I became a professor. It's not an uncommon story. But I do think the actual answer to your question of the drama bug, I was been thinking about a lot recently, because I actually think I got bit by the drama bug because I was obsessed with the Muppets in the first run of the Muppet Show.
You have come to the right place to tell this story. I'm excited.
And so I think with the re-release of the original series on Disney Plus, I was really sort of encountering the fact that so much of because I grew up in a rural area of New Mexico, I don't actually remember the very first time I went to the theater. And I don't think anybody took me to the theater. I think I went to the theater when I asked to go to the theater. And the only reason I knew to ask to go to the theater was the Muppets. And indeed, I do think my first great success as a theater maker was in the 5th grade. My family, we moved to Saudi Arabia. I was already a huge Muppet fan. And we were in this small community, a residential sort of compound. And so for the first time I had neighbors after growing up in the mountains. And I, in my entrepreneurial zeal and weird obsession, I started a business where I would make a themed puppet show for the kids' birthday parties.
Oh my gosh.
I made a lot of money for a 10-year-old.
Wow.
Because of all the distortions of Saudi Arabia, plus your theme Cinderella, I'll make you a puppet show about Cinderella. And I show up, and all the moms think it's cute. And it's like, but I don't know how many of them I did, maybe a handful, but that was really, when I think back on it, that was actually the pure version of me as a theater maker, because it actually maps in some ways to the performance making I do now. Because in that moment, it was basically a one-man show where I was writing and directing and performing and doing the whole thing by myself. And that was sort of my perfect zone. And so then I tried to be an actor, and then I was a director, and then I was sort of edged a little bit into producing, and then stopped doing it altogether, went off to become a history professor, and ended up, because of looping back into becoming a theater history professor. But then when I picked up performance practice again, what did I end up doing? I ended up doing solo performance, where I wrote it and basically directed it and then performed it. And so in some ways, the Muppet moment was the moment that is the purest of my discovering the kind of ways I like to make theater.
That is awesome.
I
Go
can't
ahead.
believe that you, sorry, I got too excited. I love the idea that you pulled apart even as a kid, like, these are puppets and this is how you like tell a story and this is how you do like make a show, and you were like, I can do that, how hard could it be, you know? I love
the crucial thing was the I came of age before we had like VCRs, before we had all of these things, but the key kind of customized technology that we did have was, for whatever reason, in the mid-70s, it became a thing to give kids little sort of cassette recorders, you know, and mine had actually like a little handle, and it was sort of like, and so for whatever reason, I ended up, I think my mom, I don't know how it was, but we got this whole stash of early audiobooks, of read-along books, of like of these fairy tale stories and stuff like this that would have. So I was really pretty much into reading along with somebody speaking the words, and then using that same audio cassette recorder, I would have blank cassettes, and I would literally put it up next to the television playing The Muppet Show and record the audio, and would re-listen to that every week. So I would sort of study it. And so in some ways, it was sort of this kind of curious circumstance of the technology and the ways in which listening to the performance, sort of imagining it, sort of doing what I always say is what I love most about theater as opposed to other medium. And especially in this remote era, I think the remote performances I love the most, the ones that hold on to this, which allow our imaginations to finish the thought. You know, rather than filling in all the blanks for us. And it was, I think that's what at the heart of what the drama bug was for me, was this idea of imagining a world and imagining what are the choices we make to conjure this world, which once the tape ends or once the lights come on, the world is gone.
I don't think we've asked this on a After Hours yet, but it might be a tricky question. Do you feel like you identify with any of the Muppets? If you were a Muppet, who would you be?
Well, a friend of mine just posted the other day, a friend of mine whose partner loves the Muppets and who never really connected the Muppets because there weren't very, there was a gender thing that sort of really blocked her. But and then the other day she posted, she goes, I realized that I think the way to solve the Muppets is they're non-binary. The Muppets are effectively a non-binary community. And that it's like Miss Piggy's a femme, but she's still in this sort of weird genderless zone. And so I think for me, that was what I loved about the Muppets, as opposed to, say, Sesame Street, which I also loved, is there was something a little chaotic about the Muppets. So I sort of migrated between feeling I had a lot of affinity with Robin, the nephew, and I had a lot of affinity with Gonzo and Fozzie. So I think people experience me more as a Ralph, but but yeah, never a Piggy. Never a Scooter, never any of the ones who were more like, but the codependent, can't we all get along Kermit part, that's definitely there. But all of them. That's the gift of the Muppets. They keep on giving. And so I mean that's been the fun part of revisiting the Muppets now for the first time in a long time, is been able to sort of see how much goofiness and how much sweetness and how much sort of like I also love the fact that the Muppets were, along with Cher, were the variety show that people wanted to do. Right, and because they had such a good time doing it. They had a great time working with Cher and just going for it with the Muppets. And so for me, it's like I love that world, especially of the original Muppet Show.
I really like that non-binary read too on it, because I've been re-binging the Muppet Show right now, and I do find something so sort of inherently queer about the Muppet Show, you know, and I think I mean, the Muppets in general, but the Muppet Show, just sort of the aspect of them all sort of living in this theater and putting on shows together. And, you know, this sort of, yes, I suppose in 70s terms, they are gendered, but like you look at it now and it's like, oh my God, they're just like free spirits, just like making their art together. And I adore it.
Well, and it is like a pretty male-based creative team. There's a lot of things that I think are really there. But one of my colleagues, a guy named Jordan Schildkraut, wrote a great essay about 12 years ago that I highlighted in my little newsletter a couple weeks ago about reading them as a queer text. And it just sort of really opens up the ways in which this kind of polymorphousness of them all is that the fact that there's always something a little bit unstable about them, and there's which the rules can go like I love like that noses come off and these kinds of alternate worlds, and then all the genre play. I think the way that they play with genre, very much sort of asking us to think what the rules are and imagining beyond the rules. And that is, for me, as a queer child of the 70s in particular, that is a kind of a path toward understanding, a path beyond the expected binary.
Huh. I'm just remembering now that you talk about it. It was I think it was my first taste, not only of like showmanship and musicals, but really the backstage drama, which like I think it actually is where I got all my really bad jokes that we do in the office.
Well, I mean, the Muppet Show is full of terrible jokes. I mean, that is one of the great pleasures of it. And I think that's, but you're right. I think that part of what I love about the Muppets even still is how rarely do we get a place that's really about joy and community, and you don't have to be good. You just have to try kind of sense of ethic. But we see backstage, we see on stage, and we also see the audience. And there's that sense, and we don't often. And I think that that's part of a lot of how I learned a lot. I know it's the very first time I thought about theatrical architecture. I know it was the first time I learned the proscenium arch and the fourth stage and the curtain and the idea of a box seat versus a house.
Totally.
I totally learned a lot of the canon of what 20th century performance was, even though this was also a vaudeville, like it was a throwback. It was very much rooted. So when I went to my first Broadway show, it was like, it's like the Muppets. You know, it's like this kind of familiarity that came with it.
And the songs too, I mean, that they ended up doing were such a taste of the musical theater canon too. You know, you never get that now. Puppets singing songs from Camelot. I mean, no.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's and that is when I talk about it, the other thing that the Muppets is a key way into who I am is also, I would say that not only were they the place where the drama bug bit, but they were also the place where what bit me as a cultural historian too. I began to get a sense that there's a story behind that. That's coming from somewhere that I see that's a joke, but I don't get it. What's the reference? I started understanding that there was more to this story, and my what became my life's work as a researcher and a scholar and a writer is in some ways all about that, like watching a weird thing from some other moment and trying to figure out why it made sense, why they made it, why they cared about it, who liked it, who hated it. And a lot of that sense of my whole list of research questions, I think were probably stirred and prompted by the Muppet Show.
Can you tell us a little bit about how you got into teaching and the more academic realm of theater?
Well, I think what it was I hit a wall in my 20s around making performance, where I just sort of needed to reorient and everything like this. And I went home to New Mexico with the expectation of I did the thing that you should never do as a theater person in your 20s. You should never tell your parents you're coming home to study for law school. But I did that. And I was sincere because I really wanted, I was working with a small downtown theater company, and we had encountered some rights and some contract issues that were just us not being sophisticated. And I thought, I got the brains, I'm moving into production. If I follow this path, I'll probably want to have my own theater someday. Maybe I do an MFA in arts admin, but I think I really want a legal side to it. So I was really thinking of it in terms of moving on, in terms of being a theater professional. And so I went home to New Mexico, studied for a while, the LSAT, which was terrible. And then I ended up taking a non-degree course at the University of New Mexico the reason I could take it non-degree at the law school was because it was also through American Studies, which is where I had got my degree, sort of interdisciplinary cultural history.
Mm-hmm.
And so I took this graduate course in American Studies called Sex Culture Law, which was taught jointly at the law school. And I thought this would be a good way for me to, and within 6 weeks, it was clear I was not going to law school. It was clear to all my law school friends. It was clear to the law school professor. It was clear to everybody that you're not a law person. You're that kind of person. And at that point, I was like, oh, dang, the plan is gone.
Uh-oh.
And so I thought, and then I ended up, there was a sort of a very specific scholarship that would have paid for a master's degree. And I was like, I'm not doing anything else right now. Here's a scholarship. So let me do this master's degree, a couple extra letters behind your name. What do you need?
Yeah.
You can do whatever with, I'll do a shingle with that. And about halfway through, I realized that a lot of what I loved about theater, which was, creating experiences, sort of really grappling with cultural texts and community and in conversation, I realized that a lot of what I loved most about the theater, I could also do in the classroom.
Mm-hmm.
And a big part of what I always loved about making theater was the research part of just learning about the text. And so I said, like, oh, this is a lot of the things I love the most without frankly, the business side, which is the stuff that was making me sad.
Yeah.
And so I just thought, like, okay, I'll switch gears and I'll go be a history professor. And it was a moment when I sometimes said, I'm going to break up with theater.
Mm-hmm.
I'm done with you. Thanks. Bye. And of course, what ends up happening is my research interest sort of keeps dragging me over to the things I know and see and love the most, which are performance. Mm-hmm. And so it's been a consistent thread, like the bio you read, Johnny, the race, gender, sexuality within and through popular culture, that's been sort of what I've been working on since college. Like, I've been really interested in how do we look at a popular culture text from the past and what does it open for us about what did we understand and not understand or think we knew, or what were the commonplace attitudes or like, so that's always and so I found that groove. And one of the things I didn't know when I was doing my PhD, I mean, I did my PhD at Yale, and so a lot of people now think I went to Yale Drama. Mm-hmm. And I'm so illegible in certain ways, and I'm like, no, I barely could cross. Like, I barely walked into the building a couple times, and barely knew anybody because I did it in American Studies, and I had no idea that I would end up in theater departments. I had no idea I would end up, when I came back to the East Coast and where the job at Princeton, ended up building so many really generative conversations and connections and networks within the profession. So it was sort of an interesting way of coming back into the industry, and trying to find a way, which is really what my mission has been since I came back to the East Coast in 2012. And it's been trying to find a way to do what I do, but in a way that can offer those skills to theaters, not so much coming in, I'll do the research for you, but how can my capacities as a thinker, as somebody who thinks as a historian, who's somebody who has these fluencies, how can I be in productive conversation with theater makers now? So that's sort of, even though I primarily identify as a historian, I also I'm very interested in trying to figure out how does my lens as a performance historian help us understand the current moment.
Mm-hmm. I would also say, from my work with you, I think you also understand being a director, which I guess is the professor too, because you're very well versed in group dynamics and how groups work together, which obviously is at the heart of theater.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, and that's what, like, I mean, I had that, like, there was a moment when so there's a moment when I stopped getting parts because Ben Schenkman and Joel De La Fuente and Josh Hamilton were getting all the parts. and I stopped getting parts. And I was like,
we're starting this feud today, by the way. We're getting Team Brian.
Yeah. Well, and so I was like, but then I went to Brown in the first few years that Paula Vogel was there. And so the playwrights workshop was really blooming. And one of the most exciting periods every year was the New Play Festival. And so that was really the thing that connected me to the idea of new work. And so I became very passionate. I remained very passionate about new work. And it was really, that's what my skills as a director were really well suited for, which is like not so much like this is my vision of what Cyrano de Bergerac needs to look like. Not so much that style, but just more like, okay, playwright, you're freaking out. Okay, actors, you're freaking out. Okay, we have $2. Okay, how do we make this all work? And that kind of sense of how to keep people confident that what we were doing was something together really did draw upon my what was good. And that's why, like, and Paula Vogel said, I think you're a director. And so I was like, okay, I guess you're Paula Vogel, so you must be right.
Yeah.
And I realized that after sort of going to New York, got the Drama League, came to New York, was working. I like to say I started out a step or two below Broadway and spent the next 5 years working my way down.
Right.
I kept wanting to find that space of community and collaboration and those kind of things. And in the early and mid 90s, it was the kind of director I was not the kind of director you were supposed to be. As somebody who is there like to sort of, I'd make a room. Was not really what people wanted to hear. They wanted to hear your stamp, what stamp you were putting on something.
Yeah.
And so I sort of ended up finding a small theater company downtown, a queer theater company. And I was like, okay, let's bring these new, and it was like a lot of solo work was happening. So how do we make all of this stuff happen? And so I was moving in a slightly directing, really lifting other people's work, which is also what I loved as a director. And so, and so it was really that kind of set of skills. And then things shifted, as we've said. And for the next 15 or so years, I actually labored under the assumption that I was a failed director. That was sort of one of my lists of my identity, the failed director. And then I had the great opportunity being invited to direct a show by a small company in Albuquerque, to be paid and to direct a writer who I didn't really know in college, but became very fascinated, Charles Ludlam. So it was this perfect opportunity for me to really go to my voice, like this is the kind of stuff I like directing. And I directed the show and it did well for the company. It was a good show. And as we were in like the second to last rehearsal, I was sitting there going like, I'd really just rather be home writing. What's going on? And I realized that my skills are very well suited to directing. But I was also at a point when I was beginning to realize that I think my creative work is actually more like my creative space is more about either creating the space or writing and really writing. And so at that point I was like, okay, I think that was maybe why I was a failed director, because it wasn't actually it used my skills well, but it didn't connect all the circuits. So it would spark and sustain me through the struggle. Because when I talk to students now, I always try to say, you've got to find a way that what you're doing completes a circuit of a sustaining circuit so that you can go when it's low and go when it's high. You can't, and if there's a disconnect there, then it's going to you're going to sort of loop it out. So you either find a way to bridge that or like, is the momentum there? Is the energetic momentum going to be there for you? And that's something I didn't know that I needed. And now I realize like, no, I really like, I like watching and I like talking and I like writing. So, and my story, my performance work has been fun because it's nice that it's low stakes. It's nice that it happens when it happens and I'm not really trying to make it work. And it's pretty good. And so it's like, it gives me it helps. And I try to do, one of the things I haven't been able to do it in the last couple of years, but I try to do a TV spot here or there whenever I can, sometimes in a small part or sometimes doing like I helped a student on a game show because I like just being in the space of production periodically, just so I can remember what it feels like. And in terms of film and television, I don't know that world. So it's good for me to have those opportunities to be in that context, just to sort of keep learning a sense of what it's like in the space.
Now, I think I'm saying, remembering this correctly, that you have more than one solo show. Is that right? Or yeah. When did that sort of happen? Was it during when you were working with the company that was doing a bunch of solo work, or?
No, I think I was trained in that, sort of creating events for like Five Lesbian Brothers or like we were
Or a puppet show for birthday parties. That's
we were presenting this incredible work all the
Yeah.
time in the early 90s. So I was really able to see a lot of those amazing shows. But it really came actually in an accidental way, where I had been sort of exploring fiction writing with a teacher for a while. And in academia, sometimes you have research funds, like the funds that you have, discretionary funds. And I had a little bit, and they were about to go away. They were about to sort of disappear if I didn't find a way to spend them. And it was literally on a day when I was looking sort of like, what can I spend $200 on? What membership can I buy? What can I do? And a friend of mine sent me this email saying, a couple people want to do this solo performance workshop class, and I'm looking for a fourth. Do you have it? And I said, how much is it? It was like to the dollar almost. So I was like, okay, I don't know if I can do it, but I'm going to give you the money and I'll try. I can't promise anything. It's stressful. And luckily, the first day, there was another person in the class who was really good. And so that just meant my game. We were suddenly my game showed up. And I was like, well, if Vivian's in here doing good work, I better show up with some good work. And then that led to what was my first show called I Was the Voice of Democracy, which reflects on an experience I had as a 17-year-old when on a whim, I entered a patriotic speech writing contest and ended up winning it out of like 300,000 people. So it was like this, and it led me into this very concentrated experience of a microvision of fame. And so it was, and I had the actual audio recording of my speech from when I was 17, and I had all these artifacts, and so I knew there was a show there. And then just in the context of this class, this little festival that happened in Albuquerque, I just decided, okay, I'll do this. And it worked. And the show was good. And then Vivian said, let's take it to Taos. Why don't you do your show and I'll do my show? And I went to Taos. And then some other friends started asking me, can you come do it there? And then over the next couple of years, it performed around the world and mostly at universities or small cultural organizations. And of course, what ends up happening is when you do when you write one book or do one show, people asking, what is your next show?
Sure.
And so my jokey answer was, well, if my first show was about how my voice, because I got this scholarship and it paid for my first year at Brown. And so I said, if my voice paid my bills for my first year of college, maybe my next show is how my voice pays my bills for the years after college when I was a phone sex operator. And so my next show, Touch Tones, was about my years as my young theater maker years when I was and I was paying the bills by working nights as a phone sex operator. And so Voice of Democracy and Touch Tones. And I also have another show called Boy Like That, which is a little bit more of a sort of a hodgepodge, sort of like this weird little fragment pieces, more like a musical set than a show, but a show. But yeah, Touch Tones is the one I've done a few times. And Voice of Democracy is very scripted, very set, very, very much almost in Spalding Gray with me, with the pages and the directions and all of this. Whereas Touch Tones begins with me sort of telling the story, and then it opens up to an interactive where I ask the audience to basically text me, and I respond to the beeps of my texts as though they were calls on the line. And so it ends up being a kind of a little bit more interactive. So every show is a little bit different.
When can we see that? I'm curious.
Season 2023 at Keen Company.
Yeah, no, maybe. I mean, it's just, I usually do it when asked. So, you know, that's, there's shows in a box. They don't have, they're pretty, I built them so that they're pretty low overhead. I mean, it's, you know, pretty much plug and play. I walk into a space and we can go. With Touch Tones, I need a Madonna mic. So that's sort of hard, but I have one kinda. And so that one requires some audio tech, but yeah, they're pretty, and Touch Tones, I haven't really, like Voice of Democracy, I did enough that I locked it, that it's a show, it's a thing. And I know exactly. Whereas Touch Tones, I'm still figuring it out, and also because each time I've done it, the sexting responses take the show in very different places. The one place that often takes it is to reflecting on that period in terms of the AIDS era. That's the one thing that comes up a lot. The other thing that comes up a lot is around sexual objectification and misogyny. And so those are the two, but then sometimes they go totally other places, and sometimes they remain very lighthearted. Other times it becomes pretty, and it usually just depends on who's in the room and who's got a question and who's never thought about this before. So those are the two main shows. And it's secondary priority. I'm trying to write, like I was supposed to write a book in the summer of 2020, and 2020 had other ideas for all of us.
Right.
So that's my plan for 21 is to try to finish that book this summer. And
So are we allowed to ask you, I don't know if this is like a Sophie's Choice question, but are we allowed to ask you, like, what is your favorite, either maybe your favorite area, favorite thing that you've researched, favorite book, something along those lines?
Well, I think one of the things that's my problem is, and it's a great thing as a theater goer, is I love pretty much everything. It takes a lot for me to not like something. So I'm infinitely interested in many things. But I do think the way I'll answer your question is my sweet spot in terms of I can always get lost in learning more about basically 1945 to 1970.
Oh, wow.
Especially in the expressive arts, especially in theater and performance. And it's because it's such a period of transition. It's such a period of style. So many things that, like, it's when the actor studio comes in. It's when we see off-Broadway exploding. It's when all these different diverse voices are having one set of conversations in the 40s and another set of conversation in the 50s and another set of conversation in the 60s. And so basically, I think 1945 to 1974 is a period where I can, and I've just been of our comfort zones of the last year, like the thing I've really taken on is instead of having just a background show, which I often do, would have like Law and Order or something just on background on my television, because I have television and I have traditional cable. What I now do is I have I'm totally reliant on my TCM app and my Criterion subscription to just watch really random stuff. And the thing I find is I am always more interested if it's like 1947 to 1974, especially if I've never heard of it and somehow it ends up on Criterion, or sometimes it ends up in rotation on TCM. And so I'm watching a lot of random movies and love watching actors, love tracking actors. And it's just a period, like a couple years ago, I became obsessed with the original Perry Mason and decided to watch all 8 seasons. And one of the things I loved about it was being able to track all these actors who some had come from Hollywood, some ended up in 70s television, but just tracking the seriously working actors. And there's that way that watching a movie or sort of ends up being a node that bounces out to so many different cultural worlds. And that's sort of what I love about this period is I think it's just like doing this, following that one interesting actor and clicking on them and doing a little bit of sniffing around and saying like, you're really good. Why don't I know who you are? And it's like, oh, well, that's because you basically ran this whole acting studio.
Yeah.
You were a legendary acting teacher and you only did a couple movies here and there and did a lot of small theater that wasn't necessarily Broadway or, so it's just that, like, that's where I'm just constantly fascinated is that period. And so that's what I think. And I often say I specialize as 20th century popular performance, straddles into the late 19th and early 21st, of course, but it's really that mid-century moment that is what excites me the most. And that's why, like, in some ways, the tent pole of my first book is West Side Story, which lives right in that sweet spot. My next book, which is about the history of casting and the material practices of how all the ways that we came to understand, that's the pivot moment when casting become a profession, when the audition gets formalized. It's right in that sweet spot of what is sometimes called the American century, the period right after World War II and up and through Vietnam.
Fascinating. Really interesting.
One thing, okay.
No, please, Ashley, go ahead.
This is not that exciting, but one thing I often miss about having or sort of like the old days of TV, even for me, was just the endless kind of flipping and just happening on something that you have no idea what it is.
Yeah.
Now you have to like intentionally watch something, which can be fun. But I remember even as a kid, my parents were very much like TCM, classic movies, black and white, sort of that Muppet Show, like that world. So in a way, I grew up watching all that stuff too. And just it coming on and being like, I don't know what this is, was always thrilling in a way. You know?
Well, I think that I've always been, as you could probably tell, I've always been TV obsessed. Even though I lived in a rural area with only 2.5 channels, and then moved to Saudi Arabia with barely any channels and weird early access to VCRs. So I've always been TV obsessed, but I've also been like, one of the things I do really am grateful for about my experience is I watched shows I hated because it was what was on.
Yeah.
I'm not going to not watch television. That was incomprehensible. I had to watch television. So that meant I became a student of, I watched a lot of stuff I wouldn't have chosen to watch. You know, because I think if I'd come up today when I could have really rabbit holed and really sort of only watched, really become an expert in this, the way that sort of even narrow lanes of culture can become infinite in the realm of the internet, I would have really loved that, you know, and I'm grateful that in some ways I had to watch things that weren't good or interesting. Or, you know, and that's, I think, part of, I love what, you know, in media studies or media scholars would call this, what you're talking about, flow, like the idea of just what's there and what comes on next and what commercials you have to watch because, you know, those kind of things. And that I still like listening to radio stations. I still like, you know, I like being surprised by what comes next.
It strikes me that you're like, even from building a puppet show to one-man show to like working to directing to even your work in like as a professor in academia and sort of the anti-racist work, it feels like you're always building the room, which is exactly what you're talking about, why you kind of ran away from directing. Is that something in hindsight that makes sense after all the pieces are put together? Or even as a kid or a young adult, you were like, this is where I'm leading, you know?
Well, I do think that that's a couple of years ago. I did a thing where I was trying to figure out what are the things, like I mentioned before, what are the things that add, even when I'm burned out on them, they still are sparking.
Yeah.
What are the things? And I realized trying to take them away from tasks and more to practices. And I'm not going to be able. I could turn around and read the little card I have on my wall that has them all. But one is like experience creator. One is something about curious researcher, you know, like there's these things that are the things that will get me even going out of my doldrums. Like if something sparks that curiosity, that's part of why I think during the pandemic, this sort of research excitement has watching the things I've watched, because it just gives me enough to be curious about and to be curious again, and not sort of, so I think it is, I mean, that's the benefit of middle age, right? Is you get a sense of what are the things I keep doing and what are the things that I keep liking doing. And luckily I'm in a gig as a professor where a lot of the pieces are there. And if I'm careful, I can make sure that I prioritize the things that actually do fill my sails as opposed to deplete my sails. And I think part of the reason I got into really being more active in seeking out new training in terms of anti-racism and all of that was a combination of wanting to create the rooms responsibly, wanting to hold my sense of the power I had in front of a classroom, hold that responsibly and with current information, but then also the curiosity of always wanting to keep learning, because that's the thing I realized that the burnout for me is when I get bored. You know, and that's why sometimes it's hard to finish a book. And just, I think why I got bored in that one part of the rehearsal process, where it's like you stop learning at a certain point. Like when you're in the last couple days of the show, it's like you're just trying to fix it. You're not really discovering. And I think that, and when you head to a midpoint in writing a book, you're really at the point of trying to deliver as opposed to keep discovering. And that's the part, getting over that hump of getting into like when I get bored of it, but when I just like, I need to stop learning more about this. I just need to write the book, or I need to that's where it can get tricky for me. And that's why I've got this book that should have been written a couple of years ago, but I keep finding reasons not to finish it.
Do you have a favorite class that you like to teach?
Well, usually like luckily at Princeton, because we're not a major, My courses have to be appealing electives, which means I can make them sound cool. I have to find a way to make them sound cool and fun.
Appealing electives is such an amazing category.
It's like this thing where it's like I can't say, like at my previous job at the University of New Mexico, I taught theater history 1 and theater history 2.
Mm-hmm.
Like nobody wants to take those courses, and certainly not the people who have to take the courses. My gift was trying to make it to convert 60 to 80% of my students to realizing they liked theater history.
Yeah.
Here I have to trick people into learning about theater history. And so I think that the courses that I've liked the most, I teach one course called Gender Crossings in the American Musical Theater, which is when I first was titling the class, I was thinking, do I do world history of drag? Because that's basically what I teach.
Mm-hmm.
I teach the global history of gender crossing performance, but I use the American musical as the sort of the Trojan horse because the American musical, there's all the different ways that gender crossings happen thematically and stylistically and all of that. And that course is often a lot of fun, especially because of the cultural moment we are in right now in terms of students being very interested in gender crossing performance and questions of gender identity. And so to have a conversation about what do we do with anybody's an Allison and Angel, Rent and Fun Home and West Side Story, all producing these non-binary characters, but in very different historical moments of what it meant to be that. And so it opens up those kind of questions, but it also lets me teach British panto and Japanese traditions, takarazuka, and all these other kinds of things. And so I like teaching those kind of courses where I trick them into learning theater history by teaching this really cool, fun stuff. Mm-hmm. I taught a course once, and I don't know that it'll really work out to teach it again, though I really had a great time, which was basically a history of the Miss America pageant.
Oh, wow, fascinating.
And it was so cool because of the way the pageant and its 100-year history now sort of mark a really fascinating, like even the cycles of the pageant's own popularity and its own, and the ways, what is a pageant as a genre, performance genre, what is a pageant, it just opened up all the things I love doing. And so most of the students had never watched the Miss America pageant. So it was also a matter of like sort of bringing it in. And that was one of my early pandemic, I would watch old Miss America pageants on YouTube. That was early in the pandemic. That's how I got through, was watching really old Miss America pageants. But yeah, so those are the kind of courses I love teaching. But also, like, there's a course I'm teaching, and I taught both semesters this year just because of the world, called Theater and Society Now, which is basically theater current events. And that's where, like, I run this newsletter called Theater Click, which is a weekly newsletter which aggregates a bunch of links and stuff like that about what was going on in the world of the theater that week. And that newsletter exists because I was teaching this class. And so the students have to read this newsletter every week. And that becomes the foundation for us to talk about what's going on in the world of theater and how does the theater become a microcosm for broader questions about equity and about access and about economics of culture and visibility and status and the economies of status and power and prestige and stuff like this. So that course is often quite interesting because it keeps me on my toes because I have to really pay attention to what's going on in the world. But it's also a kind of what I love about that class is usually about half of the students are not theater people. And so, and the other half are total like obsessives in their particular section of theater obsessive. And so it is this kind of space of like, how do we understand the theater as just one cultural industry that actually opens up a broader set of questions about what do we expect of institutions? What do we expect of representation? What do we expect of when we get mad at an institution, or when we get mad about representation, or when we get mad about questions of accessibility, whether those be financial or otherwise, what other conversations are we actually talking about? What is often at the heart of a lot of the current events in theater actually opens into broader social issues. And so it's how if we look at something as rarefied as theater, how does that help us think about these broader questions? And that's the fun part of that class. So
That's great. I have a feeling that if you offer that Miss America class, I know many people who want to audit it. I think some people on this call right now.
Making me mad I didn't get into Princeton. That's all.
Yeah, we're gonna show up with like, I don't know, newsboy hats and like backpacks. We're gonna try to sneak fun in.
Exactly.
Well, the best part was when I taught the class the last time, I was able to get one of my students from the University of New Mexico who was a really experienced runner-up in both the Miss America.
Wow.
She never made the Miss America National, and she never made Miss USA, but she was in the pageant circuit as a first runner-up for like 9 years. And so I was able to have her come in and train and give us a workshop in how to like pageant 101.
Oh wow!
So we all were walking around, how to do the walk, how to answer questions, how to, and it was amazing. It was an amazing experience because that was sort of the fun. It was a gender studies class. Most of the students in it were not performers, but it was also like, what is embodied knowledge? What is the way that Missy coming in and sort of like talking to us about it and then putting on some of the garments and watching her transform? How is that embodied knowledge, which is the core premise of performance studies, is how do we know things through our practice and have ways of analyzing and cultural knowledge that is carried in our bodies and in our repertoire that may never be on a book page, and so on the pages of a book. So it was a good class, and I just don't know, just logistically, and I think I would have taught it again had the pandemic not happened, because it's the 100 years. We're at the 100 years of the pageant, so I would have really tried to sort of coincide that with the 100-year thing, and but yeah. It's also the pageant system is completely volunteer driven, and the pageant organization itself is a little bit in organizational chaos. So it was hard to sort of teach a class because everything was a little crazy.
Yeah.
But little did I know that was preparing me for everything that would come in the following year.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm obsessed with that. Well, we are at the time for the Keen Question Bowl.
Oh,
Favorite show.
Okay. Random lightning round. Getting to know you questions. I can't see them before I pick them. Okay. What language have you always wanted to learn that you don't speak now?
I don't speak Spanish.
Oh, uh-huh.
So
clearly you're speaking English right now. Do you speak any other languages other than English?
I don't. I think the two like I was raised not speaking Spanish, though everybody spoke to Spanish around me. So I'd love to sort of connect that leap. And then I think the other one would be ASL and Arabic.
Oh, interesting. I've really wanted to learn ASL recently as well. Okay, let's see. All right. Somehow we already asked that one. Okay, let's see. Do you have a favorite beverage? It could be cocktail. It could be warm beverage. It could be whatever your go-to. Oh,
I like bubbles. I like bubbles. So water and Diet Coke. I like carbonation. My favorite beverage is carbonation. When I drink alcohol, I love champagne. It's bubbles. I like bubbles.
Right on.
Do you have any dream cast members? If you were going to assemble a group to put on any sort of show or presentation, do you have people you'd love to work with?
Well,
it's tough.
Yeah, no, that's tough. It's also that kind of like any dinner party of any period in time kind of question. Like I'm
it's almost too many. Yeah,
my world is colliding. I think. God, of course, all of them. I mean, that's the problem. I think the person I would love to be able to watch work. One person that comes to mind is Toni Collette. I would love to have Toni Collette, Jennifer Lopez, and trying to think. Like those. Like I'd love to be able to watch some folks work up close. You know. Like, and those are two that I'd love watching. So
I'm smelling
Toni Collette and Jennifer Lopez opening a Broadway musical.
That's a good two-hander.
Please.
I'd like to see them in Crimes of the Heart. Let's just add a third.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, no, I think the question I have would be I mean, I think like another actor I absolutely am always thrilled to watch is Lorraine Toussaint.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Who most of us might know through television, through Law and Order early episodes, or there was a Lifetime show. But yeah, so I mean, I think so a little bit out of the generational thing, but yeah, there's certain actors like I would love to be able to travel back in time and watch Raul Julia work.
Yes.
So for me, it's like I'm an avid rewatcher and I'm an avid watcher, and part of the reason I love directing was I got to watch actors I got to watch an actor discover. And so, and I think Jennifer Lopez is exceedingly talented in ways that have not been developed, not given platform, and to be able to sort of be in a room while that was happening would be a big one for me.
I will never get over her not winning. She wasn't even nominated for Hustlers. Best performance of the year. Oh my God.
Well, I mean, it's like that's the thing. It's like I think what it was like, there was one of those Twitter memes that happened a while ago where like you could go through and say who should have been nominated, and I found 4 J-Lo performances. There was a backbench of additional other ones. So I mean, I think that definitely Jennifer Lopez is going to be one of those folks that at just some point it'll be one of those her time kind of moments.
Right.
And but yeah, so I'm fascinated by her.
This is a quicker one. Pancake or waffle?
Pancake.
Me too. Team pancake.
I love
we have a household divide. My partner's a waffle person and I'm a pancake person.
All right.
That is fascinating. I feel like with pancakes you can have more than one, but with waffles you can only have one waffle.
Yeah,
I always want more, so I want the pancakes.
I like pancakes because my favorite thing is to get one giant pancake and then just put a whole bunch of butter under the pancake and then pour the syrup on it, and it just becomes this sort of butter cake. It becomes a butter cake.
Oh man,
I like cake, so pancake is more like cake for me than a waffle. Waffle doesn't feel like it.
There you go.
Do you have any favorite like belting in the shower jams or like favorite songs that you'd like to share? We know you as a person who has a pretty great playlist because we heard part of it.
Yeah. I mean, I let's see. What are the embarrassing songs that I've always wanted to sing? I mean, I think when Chorus Line comes up, I mean, I think I actually auditioned once with nothing, and I just as a young person. And so I think that's a sweet spot for me. So.
Every single one of those songs is perfect somehow.
Yeah, no, like I'll sing at the ballet. I'll sing all the like that. Like Chorus Line. It's deep in my bones. Oh, the song is Guido's song. Guido's song.
Love it.
That is the song that was going to be like when I would imagine myself taking vocal lessons and then culminating with a cabaret. Guido's song was going to be a capstone moment. So.
That was in my book as a precocious 12-year-old, so I hear you.
Well, and the other one that was in that show, that was an anchor of that show, was it's a Fine Line. I forget what the actual title is. Evan and Q. It's a Fine Line.
Yeah.
Love and Waste of Time.
Yes.
Like that song, so simple, but so good and so much.
Yeah.
Okay, I feel like this is going to be a hard one because you're naturally curious and such a learner. But would you have any alternate professions? Like if you could do anything else, is there something else you'd be doing?
Well, I think it's a gift that I accidentally missed because I would have been a brilliant casting director. I could have become a monstrous casting director too. So it's sort of lucky that path didn't open to me. I didn't know that was a thing because I just didn't. And if I'd known that was a thing, I might have sought it out, and I might have become monstrous in ways I don't want to think about. But, but I think that so I think that's one path not taken, and because again, I love actors. I love watching actors. I love learning about actors. I love tracking actors. A lot of those passionate skills are right there, and I love going to the theater.
Yeah. Okay, this is the last one. And I, as a person who works with young people, I wonder if you've been asked this before, but do you have any best advice you've ever been given, or any like great advice for any listeners in general?
Well, I think the advice I give the most, and I think it's really worth, it's a simple one, and it's trust yourself to know what you know. One of the ways, like both in moments of crisis as well as in moments of doubt, like we often are not encouraged to actually do an accurate assessment of what we do know. What do you know for sure? And if you can assess what you know for sure, you can then, your bullshit detector is stronger. You can make the choices. It's always worth going back when you're deep in a project and you're confused, like go back and say, what do I know for sure? And trust yourself to know. And that's, again, something a lot of young folks are encouraged to not believe that they know things. And in fact, they actually do know a lot, and they're just trying to find the language to connect what they already know to the field as it exists. And so part of it is figure out learn how to trust yourself to know what you know, and then find those people that help you learn that.
Great advice. Love
Very
it.
well said. Well, Brian, thank you so much for spending time with us this evening. It's always great to see you. It was really wonderful to delve into a little bit more about you tonight.
Yeah, and who knew the Muppets was going to be such a centerpiece of
We
this?
might have to do a full series on the Muppets. We've got a lot talked about.
I'm
glad you asked that question, because I gave you my boilerplate answer, but then I gave you the true answer. Which is
oh, good. You
go. Great.
Amazing.
Well, thank you so much, and we just look forward to seeing you again soon. And be well and stay healthy.
Thank you. Likewise. So great to see all of you.
Yeah, good to see you. Bye, Brian.
Thank you, Brian.
Bye. Another wonderful Monday.
I love it. The Muppets, man.
Okay, it is dark outside now, but that's okay.
It is dark outside now. Yes.
It's dark outside now, but that's, Brian got us through the twilight.
Exactly.
Well, now it makes me want to get Disney Plus, because I don't have it.
I'm shocked you don't have it. Oh,
I
there's
don't have it either yet.
So
many gems on it. Oh,
I've
my
heard.
God. I mean, come on, Johnny. Don't you just want to binge The Mandalorian? Come on.
That I don't care about. Well, so let's see. This is, bizarrely enough, this is not a week in which we are producing anything else, is it?
There's no event for us to hawk this week.
But there is something coming out this week, isn't there?
Is there?
This week we will be debuting the teaser for All We Need Is Us, which is the next Here Now commission, and it is by James Anthony Tyler. It's directed by Jamil Jude. It is it's a great story, and the teaser is just will like whet your appetite. So that will be coming out in the next few days on our website and all podcasting platforms, and then it debuts at the end of next week.
And then next Monday, our guest on After Hours is Nick Blameyer, who is a keen favorite, was the lead in our production of Tick, Tick, Boom, and has been on several other keen galas and broadcasts and whatnot. We're very excited to talk to him.
I'm sure we're going to learn even more exciting stories. I feel like every Monday we've really been very lucky to get amazing guests.
And I feel like Nick is also a Muppets fan. I don't want to.
Yeah, this is going to be a new question: is which Muppet do you identify with?
Exactly.
We might have to go back and ask everyone else too. Make it a full series.
I think so. Yeah.
It's very illuminating. Well, thank you so much for joining us for another night of After Hours. We hope you have a wonderful week. Enjoy the extra hour of daylight that you have. Stay safe and well, and we look forward to seeing you at the virtual theater again soon. Good night, everyone.